over all these microphones.
Breaking news out of Detroit. Several new indictments handed out just a short time ago.
Indictments come from a corruption probe that has been circling former Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick for years. This news conference getting underway right now. Let's take a listen in.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara McQuaid. I'm the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. We've invited you here today to announce that a federal grand jury has returned a superseding indictment charging Kwame Kilpatrick, his father Bernard Kilpatrick, and others with racketeering, conspiracy, and related charges of bribery, extortion, and fraud, as well as tax violations. Also charged in the indictment were Bobby Ferguson, who was a city contractor, Victor Mercado, who was at one time the director of the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department, and Derek Miller, who was the prior chief administrative officer for the city of Detroit. The indictment charges all of them with working together to abuse Kwame Kilpatrick's public offices, both his position as state representative as well as his position of mayor of Detroit, to unjustly enrich themselves through a pattern of extortion, bribery, and fraud. I want to introduce the other members of the law enforcement community who stand with me today, who have been involved in this investigation for many years. From the FBI, Special Agent in Charge Andy Arena. From the Environmental Protection Agency, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Jeff Martinez. From the Internal Revenue Service, Special Agent in Charge Eric Martinez. And from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Breck Nolan. I want to also introduce the prosecutors from this office who've been working on this case for 6 years. They're Assistant U.S. Attorneys Michael Bellotta and Mark Chutko. Their supervisor, Kathy McCarthy, is present in the room as well. This is a lengthy indictment, and it covers a wide-ranging and sweeping pattern of racketeering, extortion, and abuse of public trust. The defendants used the power and authority of Kwame Kilpatrick's public offices to unjustly enrich not only themselves but also their families and their associates at the expense of taxpayers and donors. At the heart of the scheme, as you'll see in the indictment, was corruption in municipal contracting, and the focus of most of that corruption was in the Department of Water and Sewerage. There were the indictment includes 13 schemes involving fraud in awarding contracts in the Department of Water and Sewerage. The gist of the scheme was that Bobby Ferguson and others would use the power of Kwame Kilpatrick's office to coerce contractors to include Bobby Ferguson in contracts, which in turn provided Mr. Ferguson with tens of millions of dollars in contracts he would not otherwise have been awarded, and to the detriment of other minority contractors who would otherwise have had the opportunity to do business with the city of Detroit. In addition to these contracting schemes involving the Department of Water and Sewerage, the indictment also charges bribery and extortion committed by Kwame Kilpatrick, Bernard Kilpatrick, and Derek Miller, who solicited bribes from people who were seeking to do business with the city of Detroit or its pension funds. The bribes they received totaled over $1 million in cash payments and rides on private jets. The indictment also charges Kwame Kilpatrick, Bernard Kilpatrick, and Bobby Ferguson with defrauding donors to nonprofit organizations, including the Kilpatrick Civic Fund. They would ask donors to provide money to these funds, and instead of enriching the lives of senior citizens or children or residents of the city of Detroit, instead using the funds for their personal benefit for expenses like yoga classes, spa treatments, golf clubs, and refurbishing personal offices. I want to make a special note that this indictment charges the members of a previous administration and not the current administration of the city of Detroit or the career employees who work for the city of Detroit. In fact, to the contrary, the current administration has been very helpful to us in putting together this investigation. They provided us with records, with information, access to witnesses, and a number of other ways they've helped us to put together this investigation. And we are hopeful that this case and this indictment brings closure to this chapter in the city's history. And we hope that with this indictment, the culture of corruption is over. Today's charges conclude a 6-year investigation, as I said, and as people often ask me, what took so long? But I want to answer that because, as you can see from the indictment, this case involves very complex schemes, wide-ranging activities occurring over several years, and also the defendants work to conceal their illegal activities. The federal agencies you see before you and the prosecutors who have handled this case have reviewed literally hundreds of thousands of records and have interviewed hundreds of witnesses. And we wanted this case to be done thoroughly, accurately, and fairly. I personally want to thank all the agents and all the prosecutors who worked on this case, as well as my predecessors, U.S. Attorney Steve Murphy, U.S. Attorney Terry Berg, Corruption Chief Lynn Helland, and Kathy McCarthy, the current corruption chief, who have all worked together along with the prosecutors currently assigned to the case, Mark Chetko and Michael Bellotta. All of us together have moved the ball down the field. I also want to note that, some say Kwame Kilpatrick is already in jail. What are you doing piling on? Well, he's there on state charges for failing to pay restitution. These charges are far more broad, far more sweeping, and far more significant, I believe, and we want to send a strong deterrent message to anyone in government that if you steal from taxpayers, you are going to be held accountable, even if you leave office before an investigation ends. Getting out of office does not get you off the hook. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy Arena, who's the special agent in charge of the FBI. He's someone who's been working on this case longer than I have.